What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Tomatovito Boxing Show. Let's talk about Saturday night's fight card. Actually, Saturday evening's fight card, which at least in my time, it was airing fairly early. I think the first fight actually started about 11 in the morning. Nonetheless, Saturday's Latino night in Riyadh season fight card that Goldenboy Promotions put together. It was a stacked card. I can't say through and through because there were some up-and-coming fighters there, but from about the fourth fight on, I want to say, it was very interesting. The only fight that I didn't know about was Juan Carlos Ramirez versus Siad Al-Mayyouf, which ended up in a draw, majority decision draw. But from there, pretty much every single one of those other fights were, you name it, they were action-packed, really good, really high-skilled boxing, good pedigree boxing. The very next card was Akhmedov versus Oscar Duarte, a fight which ended up going the distance, a fight in which both fighters were heavy-handed punchers. We know Oscar Duarte from the past, and Akhmedov as well. Everybody was expecting a knockdown, maybe several knockdowns, and a knockout stoppage for this fight. Neither happened. However, both inflicted quite a bit of damage on each other. Oscar Duarte ends up getting the unanimous decision win over Akhmedov. Akhmedov, a fighter that trains out of Indio, California, with Julio, not Julio Diaz, but is it Julio Diaz? It is Julio Diaz. At least one of the Diaz brothers. We just met up with them. Russian fighter Akhmedov. Born in Uzbekistan. Let me find out. It's one of the Diaz brothers, and now it's bugging me because we were just there in Indio with the Flores cousins, Grant Flores and Gucci Manny, and they were there. We ended up seeing the Bully out there. We ended up seeing Merle John was also out there and present, but I wasn't able to get a hold of him. Juan Diaz, Julio Diaz. I think it's Julio Diaz, but I may be missing the name. Nonetheless, very, very good fight. 10-4 record now for Akhmedov. 9 knockouts. 9 knockouts of his 10 victories. Heavy-handed fighter. And Oscar Duarte now improves to 28-2-1. And a lot of promise for both of these fighters going forward. From there, we ended up seeing Oscar Collazo, minimum weight, who is now a unified champion. At the beginning of this year, if you guys recall, I happened to be calling the fight live, at least the podcast. We were bringing you the podcast live from the Footprint Center out in Phoenix, Arizona. And Oscar Collazo took part of the undercard of Jaime Munguia, John Ryder. And if you want to go back and check out that episode, I think it's episode 193, 194, an episode where we also witnessed Gabriela Fundora become champion. And a lot of promise. Well, at that card in January, Oscar Collazo, and during the post-fight press conference, he wins by knockout, and he calls out Oscar De La Hoya in the ring. And he says, 1, he wants his pay increased, and 2, he wants to go for all the titles. He wants to be unified champion, and he wants to be lined up with the other champions. Fast forward to November now, and here we are. He got his chance, and he got his chance against CP Freshmart, none other than the longest reigning minimum weight champion in the history of that division. Tamanun Ningyamtrang was the defending champion, had 12 defenses under his belt. This would have been the 13th. A complete Thai legend that he's becoming. And Ningyamtrang, with those 12 defenses, by far had to be the biggest opposition and the toughest opponent to date for Oscar Collazo. Oscar Collazo comes in with the WBO title and unifies WBA, WBO championships now at 105 pounds with an emphatic knockout, a fight that took a while to get underway. At least the first 2 rounds, maybe the first 2.5 rounds where there was very minimal action. You saw Oscar Collazo in the first 2 rounds trying to gauge the distance, trying to measure, and trying to figure out the reactionary time and the reactions of Ninh Yam Trong. Ninh Yam Trong trying to land his power and trying to establish his distance, his spacing, and his ground. Neither willing to abandon much ground, neither willing to commit fully. And towards the end of the second round, we saw a couple combinations from Oscar Collazo where he started basically opening the body of Ninh Yam Trong. By the third round, around midway through the third round, we start seeing some combinations where Oscar Collazo was starting. You see it several times throughout the fight. Oscar Collazo would initiate his attack with a right hook to the body of Ninh Yam Trong, which would end up dropping the guard of Ninh Yam Trong. He would follow it with a left body shot square in the center of Ninh Yam Trong's body. And then he would follow or finish his combination with a right hook to the head. And Collazo would clear out. He did that several times throughout the fight. And eventually, as the rounds proceeded, by round 4, by round 5 specifically, the bodywork of Collazo started taking the legs from under CP Freshmart. And Ninh Yam Trong started depleting. Stamina level started going down. And from there, we start seeing Ninh Yam Trong start basically dragging his feet in the ring. It looks like he was out by the end of the 5th round. You hear Collazo say he's done. He's done. He's got nothing. He's falling asleep. Collazo's bodywork was the story of the night. The fact that he eliminated the legs of Ninh Yam Trong, took his legs out, eliminated his mobility, and continued doing it without much action being involved. Several combinations here and there. CP Freshmart landed some good punches and some good right hooks to Oscar Collazo, but Collazo would be almost rolling with the punches and landing body shots himself. And never a dull moment for Collazo where he wasn't finding some type of way to inflict damage on Freshmart. By the 6th round, he finally finds Ninh Yam Trong and drops him. And it was a great knockdown because it wasn't a flash knockdown. This was a heavy exchange where both fighters hit each other. Ninh Yam Trong lands a right hand that glazes the nose and the top right cheek of Collazo. And Collazo, throwing a punch himself at the very same instance, manages to land flush his right hook on Ninh Yam Trong and sends him in a timber-style fall as Ninh Yam Trong staggers on his side until he finally hits the canvas, maybe about 6 to 8 feet away from where the punch happened. He ends up getting back on his feet eventually, answers a referee count. With about 30 seconds left on the 6th round, he manages to survive, and Collazo knew he was going to go in for the kill. Collazo, very calculated, because rather than a lot of people feel that fighters don't have the killer instinct because they don't just empty the tank. Collazo, very calculated and very smart. He knew which punches and how to select his punches without emptying his tank at the start of the 7th round. Completely pressed the action, but did not just throw punches and bunches. He was very selective with his attack, began to start throwing a higher amount of combinations, which would eventually open the body. And he was managing to land out of his 3-punch combinations, the onslaught that he put on Ninh Yam Trong. Every second or third punch happened to be a body shot. Eventually, he ends up caving Ninh Yam Trong once again. Ninh Yam Trong answers a referee count again in the 7th round. And at about a minute later, after that second knockdown, they happen to be in the center of the ring. Collazo comes in with a 2-punch knockout combination where he lands a sneaky left hook tight to his body, manages to land not a hook but an uppercut, manages to land this really tight uppercut close to Collazo's body, lands it right underneath the chin of Ninh Yam Trong, and then closes the deal with his right hook once again, where he completely derails and stops and drops and hurts Ning Yam Trong. Referee gets in the way, waves the fight off, and we have a new minimum weight unified champion and a complete threat to the entire division themselves. Collazo, just in 11 months, what he managed to do has been nothing short of amazing. And he is a fighter that's co-promoted by Miguel Cotto Promotions and fights under the Goldenboy banner. He's doing work. He is that guy right now, and he's acting that way. And now he's aiming his sights at a potential December return, which will more than likely not happen. But he was joking during the post-fight press conference, telling Oscar, maybe you could sneak me in on a December fight and collect another bonus check for December in time for the holidays. We know that Goldenboy, as it stands right now, they have one more card left in this calendar year, and that's going to be December 14th out in Ontario with Alexis Rocha and the former Olympian Mexican amateur standout, the Cougar Curiel. I don't know if they'll be able to sneak in Collazo in there just for another stay busy fight. I wouldn't risk it. Let him finish out the year and then get him back in action at the turn of the calendar. Great victory by Oscar Collazo, and he unifies titles. From there, we moved on to Camarón Zepeda, and William Zepeda in a very dangerous fight against Tevin Farmer, a veteran featherweight, former featherweight, super featherweight, lightweight contender, now campaigns at lightweight. This was as dangerous as any fight could be for an up-and-coming contender or someone knocking on the door of title contention. We've seen this time and again, and I'm not trying to say that they should be protecting Zepeda, but this is kind of why people admire what William Zepeda is doing in the sport of boxing, that he stays busy and the competition continues to get better, it continues to get stiffer, and he continues to answer the call. There was some controversy in this fight, and we're going to break down the CompuBox. Obviously, a lot more to cover here. This was the third fight prior to the main two, the fight prior to the co-main and then the main event. But this is a fight. You guys have heard me cover William Zepeda a lot on this podcast. You guys know that I interviewed William Zepeda after the weigh-ins and in the lead up of this past summer showdown against Giovanni Cabrera. And this fight with Tevin Farmer was supposed to be his fight against Shakur Stevenson. Shakur, of course, ended up getting injured and negotiations fell through. There was also talks that Zepeda was going to fight Baranchik. For one reason or another, that didn't happen. Talks where De La Hoya had mentioned that they could potentially go over to Russia or even Ukraine to fight Baranchik out there. And It was a comment that De La Hoya made, and then that's it. Everything went hush. We never heard about it again. So this is the reason why this fight happened. Whatever those negotiations were like, they never came out to air. We know that the Shakur negotiations fell through, and Shakur was supposed to be fighting. Who was he supposed to be fighting? He had a scheduled fight with Joe Cordina, I think, or one of those British fighters, former champions, that were moving up and making their day, or maybe it was Lee Wood. They were making their debut to 135, and then Shakur ends up having surgery on his hand. When that fight got announced, everything got thrown in the air because speculation was that Zepeda and Shakur were going to be getting this fight on. The back and forth through social media and the lack of negotiations, or how negotiations keep falling through, is the reason why we had this fight with Tevin Farmer. Farmer is a very fast fighter, and after the fight, Farmer says the way to fight these guys is when you got come forward fighters that provide or have a very high punch output. The way that you fight them is to take the action to them. A veteran move by Tevin Farmer in which he complicated the fight for William Zepeda. This is a fight where it was decided by 1 point, 95-94, as two judges deemed it. And then 95-94, one judge had it for Tevin Farmer. That was because of a knockdown. William Zepeda gets dropped in the fourth round. Whether you want to call it a flash knockdown or not, to me it was a solid knockdown. Tevin Farmer landed a beautiful punch on the chin of Zepeda, dropping him. Zepeda, of course, gets back, but he got hit a lot. This is one of the fights where I've seen Zepeda get hit the most in, and which troubles you a little bit. There's some positives and negatives that we could take away from this. Now, how did Zepeda end up etching out this decision? Well, if we look at the CompuBox, 778 total punches thrown by William Zepeda as reported by CompuBox. 778 total punches thrown versus Farmer's 587. So body punches, Zepeda threw 434 punches to the body, while Tevin Farmer threw 361 to Zepeda's body. Zepeda landed 168 power punches to the head and 79 to the body. Of the 434 thrown, 38.7% accuracy, where Farmer threw 138 or landed 138 power punches to the 168 of Zepeda and 42 to the 79 to the body for Farmer. Similar, very similar averages there, but favoring Zepeda. Definitely 30 more power punches landed by Zepeda to the head and 37 more punches landed to the body as far as power punches are concerned. Then we go to jabs. 344 total jabs thrown by Zepeda, where Farmer throws 226. Zepeda lands 91 to the head of the 344 and 11 jabs to the body successfully. Higher percentage than Farmer, where Farmer lands 55 total jabs to the head, only 3 jabs to the body. So Zepeda throwing 191 more punches and landed 66 more punches than Farmer. It's hard to outwork Zepeda. It is almost nearly impossible that you're going to outwork and outpunch Zepeda. So by stats, Zepeda is usually going to be leading the charge. But there was a knockdown. And that was a controversy, that the knockdown should have carried Farmer. The knockdown did happen in the 4th round, but Zepeda, again, he threw 191 punches more than Farmer and landed 66 more, which means the knockdown happens in round 4. By round 10, the work output of Zepeda is what ended up edging him out the fight. This was a very tight fight that when it came to a close, I thought they were going to announce a draw. Not being biased, this is as scary as, not scary, but this is as close to witnessing William Zepeda lose as I could recall. And Tevin Farmer, if it would have gone the other way, I wouldn't have been upset with it either. This would have been a huge upset that Tevin Farmer would have put. And we've seen this in the past, which is the initial point that I was going to, where contenders, high prospect contenders, title contenders, get their plans and their careers pretty much derailed by having these stay busy fights, and all of a sudden they have an off night, or they run into an opponent that just figures them out and has their number for the night and ends up derailing their plans, handing them a loss, and derailing their plans, derailing their number in the rankings or their placement in the rankings, and then everything goes out the window. And all of a sudden that fighter that was a hot prospect has to start building his way back up, and that ends up derailing their plans. And this could have been it. This could have been the wrench on the road that would have derailed Zepeda. The positives about it is how in tune Zepeda happens to be with Panda. Their communication and the way that Zepeda, regardless of the knockdown, regardless of how tight of a fight it was, he doesn't abandon the game plan. He listens and he applies the instruction of Panda and has very good communication and good understanding and a good overall aptitude as to how to apply and execute the game plan as Panda's execute or instructing him on the corner. Tevin Farmer, his plan as he announced post-fight was take the fight to him. take the fight to him, fight fire with fire, and the speed of Tevin Farmer is what was finding him a lot of success throughout the night, including his stick and move and the clinch and go. Tevin Farmer clinched and grabbed a lot throughout the night, which is something that he was doing to Raymond Muratalla in his last fight, where he would grab, circle the ring, and then pot shot his way, and he would find success. It's the style that Tevin Farmer has, and it's very frustrating. It's very hard to look good against Tevin Farmer because when he lands with such precision and such speed that you end up being on the wrong side of it. The only way to outwork Farmer is to oblige what Farmer's trying to do. When he tries to take the fight to you, which he did to Zepeda, Zepeda was just going to throw punches and bunches, and which he obviously did. Nearly 200 more punches than Tevin Farmer and 66 more punches than landing than what Farmer did. Ended up edging him out and giving him that 1-point decision in 2 of the judges' scorecards and a split decision overall. The controversy behind this fight, Tevin Farmer has been very vocal that there was no drug testing that occurred. 1, no drug testing either before or after the fight, or in the lead up to the fight. 1. 2, the fight ended up being fought at 10 rounds. A 10-round championship fight. They put a WBC interim title for the lightweight division, an interim title to Shakur Stevenson's full version WBC lightweight title. Which means now that Zepeda got this, he is the mandatory for Shakur Stevenson now, with the piece of the WBC title. But it was a title fight fought in 10 rounds. It's very unheard of. This should have been a 12-round fight. Those 2 rounds could have been the difference maker and had these scores maybe a little bit wider and not as tight as they were. Talks are and rumors are that Tevin Farmer denied a 12-round fight and asked for the 10-round fight. Yet it was a championship fight. So Zepeda, now your WBC interim lightweight champion, and has the automatic go pass to a fight for a unification for the WBC title with Shakur Stevenson. Zepeda, by winning this fight, as close as it was, remains atop every single lightweight organization or every single world organization in the rankings. The WBO, IBF, WBA, WBC all have him as the number 1 contender and basically as the mandatory for any of the 4 champions, whether it be Tank, Baranchik, Lomachenko, or Shakur. He now has a piece of Shakur's title, the interim, so he has a direct pass to get that title unified with Shakur. Where does that leave us? In that interview, go back and check out that interview that I had with William Zepeda. It was in Spanish. I have the interview with Zepeda earlier this summer where he said that if it wasn't the Shakur fight or Tank, which is very attractive, at that time when I interviewed him, there was heavy conversations earlier this summer that Tank and Lomachenko were going to be fighting one another this month. And obviously, that's not happening. Talks are that Tank and Lamont Roach are going to be fighting, and that was supposed to happen December 14th, and that got scrapped now as well, and it looks like it's going to be sliding over to 2025 now. Zepeda, number 1 mandatory for any of these 4 champions that I just mentioned, and at that interview, he said if it wasn't Tank or it wasn't Shakur, it would be a dream of his to get a shot at Lomachenko, a fighter that he holds as a hero and that he's admired as he was coming up through the professional rankings. So don't be surprised if things go that way. But congrats to Zepeda and congrats to Farmer on another great fight, back-to-back losses, but against 2 back-to-back or 2 top contenders in that lightweight division in Raymond Muratalla and now William Zepeda, and made both fighters look bad. That's what Tevin Farmer brings to the table, and you know that he's a spoiler, and he's gonna end up having success against one of these or derailing somebody's career if he continues performing in the way that he is. His power is there, his speed is still there, and he's looking good as a lightweight fighter. We move on to the co-main event, a fight that didn't have too much action to offer, but it was one of those strategic chess match type fights between two top names in the 140-pound division. The co-main event of this card, Arnold Barbosa, who stepped in the ring with a 30-0 record, and former unified champ for the 140-pound division, Jose Ramirez, 29-1 record. Jose Ramirez lost that big, the only loss that he has is against Josh Taylor when they went for the big undisputed fight where all 4 titles were on the line, and he ended up getting dropped and stopped by Josh Taylor. Or at least dropped, but did he get stopped? I don't recall anymore. But I know he got dropped, and it was a nasty drop. Let me look it up while I'm telling you. So this fight between these two, high-profile fight, and bad blood between the two. Both fighters were previously promoted by Top Rank Promotions, and the bad blood is mostly on the side of Barbosa, where he felt that he was always the B-side or treated as the B-side to Jose Ramirez, a fight that he was asking for years now. He said dating back to maybe 4 years that he's been asking to get in the ring with Jose Ramirez, and they keep moving him to the side and pushing him aside, even though he has a solid record and he is a solid fighter. Now both fighters with Goldenboy, and both fighters on the up and up. This was a crossroads fight because Jose Ramirez is definitely part of the old guard. Regis Prograis, Josh Taylor, Ramirez, those type of fighters that are on the old guard of the 140-pound division, and the new guard being Teofimo Lopez, Liam Perro, who just dethroned Subriel Matias. Subriel Matias, I guess you could still consider part of that mix. He just came back and had a victory about a week ago out in Puerto Rico. Liam Perro putting that title, the IBF title that he lifted from Matias, on the line against Richardson Hitchens in December. You got Alberto Puello, who got elevated to WBC. Devin Haney, I believe, is coming back in 2025 and still competing at 140. So this is part of the new guard, Arnold Barbosa being part of the new guard. Even though he's been around for years, he's never gotten a fight at the top level. And for one reason or another, whether it was due to management or the promotional company, what have you, they always kept him aside. So this, even though there was no title on the line, this is a fight that was basically a title fight for Arnold Barbosa, a meaningful fight for him. So Arnold Barbosa ends up coming out with the decision victory. He gets the unanimous decision victory. Nothing major in this fight. Very good exchanges between the two. Very good combinations. Very strategic. A very high-level type chess match for the two fighters. But Jose Ramirez picks up the second defeat of his career. Fairly an active fighter, even when now that he's joined Goldenboy. He had his fight with Rances Barthelemy back in April, and then this fight in November. 2 fights for this year. Arnold Barbosa, similar type status, but he remains undefeated. So bigger things should be on the works for Arnold Barbosa. 1, 2, this fight ended up being a 10-round fight when it should have been a 12-round WBO eliminator, meaning the winner would have had a ticket to face Teofimo Lopez. Instead, it got negotiated to a 10-round fight, and that added to the bad blood between these two guys because Barbosa said that Ramirez didn't want to pay the sanctioning fees for the WBO and didn't want to agree to that. And Ramirez ended up stating, I believe his comeback was, or his reply to that claim was that the fight wasn't going to go all the way. He believed that he was going to be stopping Arnold Barbosa inside of 10 rounds. And therefore, he didn't need to make it a 12-round fight. Whatever it was, it ended up being a 10-round fight. A very good, very highly skilled matchup between these two. Scores ended up being 97-93, and 2 judges gave it 96-94, all 3 in unanimous decision agreement for Arnold Barbosa being the victor of this fight. So he improves to 31-0, and Ramirez drops to 29-2. With 18 knockouts. And again, he is in that old class. Jose Zepeda, Victor Postol, Josh Taylor, Jose Pedraza, Maurice Hooker, that class. That's where Jose Ramirez is at. So fitting that Barbosa pulled out this victory, remains undefeated, and big things should be, at least a big matchup should be in the works for Barbosa. And let's see, maybe Goldenboy is able to negotiate with Teofimo, since he's having a bit of a back and forth with Top Rank, as it was reported here in the last few weeks. Maybe Goldenboy is able to step in there and make an attractive offer for Teofimo and Barbosa to square in the ring, and then Barbosa would have had the title shot that he's been asking for so long. So congrats to Arnold Barbosa there. 140-pound division, stacked, right? Who are your champions? Rayo Valenzuela, who picked up the title from Pitbull. Teofimo Lopez, the longest reigning champ now for that division, WBO champ. Liam Perro picked up the title from Subriel Matias, defending it in December in a couple weeks' time. And Alberto Puello, who won the interim and got elevated to full status champion. Then your main event. We move on to the main event, and Zurdo Ramirez ends up picking apart, cutting, busting up Chris Billum Smith. Billum Smith, who had avenged the sole blemish on his record against Richard Riopork this past June, ends up returning the favor to Riopork and giving him, tarnishing Riopork's record just the same, returning the favor and giving him the first loss of his career. CBS avenges that loss, retained his title, and moved on to this big high-profile showdown against a lighter fighter who has migrated his way into the cruiserweight division in Zurdo Ramirez, a fighter that began his career at middleweight. Zurdo Ramirez ends up picking apart, outpointing, outscoring, and busting up CBS. He lifted the title from Arsen Goulamirian in March of this year, announcing his arrival and announcing himself as a new champion for this cruiserweight division. And Chris Billum Smith and Jai Opetaia were on paths to basically run into one another and unify. That fight fell through, I believe, several times now in the past. And with a victory here, Billum Smith would have been a unified champ and headed straight into negotiations with Jai Opetaia. Jai Opetaia now stands as the strongest champion in this division, hands down. He is the scariest, and he is the strongest champion in this division, in my opinion. Zurdo Ramirez, what he managed to do to Chris Billum Smith is basically beat him to the punch and outsmart him, outwork him. Why? Zurdo Ramirez is still fighting as a middleweight. His base is there. His foundation is that of a middleweight. So he still moves like a middleweight, even though he's a lot heavier. But his hand speed is still there, which cruiserweights are not accustomed to. This is how he got Goulamirian, and he did the same thing with the heavier punching Chris Billum Smith. Cruiserweight fighters, true cruiserweight fighters, a lot slower in footwork, a lot slower in their punch delivery, but heavier punching and a lot more punching power that they have to offer. Zurdo has to contend with that. How does he contend with the heavier punches? By outworking them, outpunching them, outlanding them, and throwing a higher volume of punches. He did it with Goulamirian, outboxed him, outsmarted him, lifted the title, and now he takes the title from CBS in the very similar fashion. Outworked them, outpunched them, managed to cut them up, and obviously that volume of punching, every 3 or 4 punches to every one of CBS, was causing and inflicting a lot more damage, and eventually ended up slowing down. And at many points, it looked like Zurdo was going to be stopping Chris Billum Smith, but it never came. The drop never came, the knockdowns never came, the knockouts or the stoppage never came. But he busted up, cut up. Chris Billum Smith relinquishes his title, and definitely the hardest loss of his career. He has fought heavier-handed fighters, heavier punching fighters in the past in his resume that have now migrated up to heavyweight division. Here he is losing to a former middleweight and a former light heavyweight. He got outworked and just beat to the punch and picked apart by a very smart, very technical Zurdo Ramirez, who is now the sole standing unified champ for this cruiserweight division. Jai Opetaia and Noer Mikelian is the WBC champion. Those are your two champions that are out there. If I was Goldenboy, I would not go the Jai Opetaia route, but I would take Zurdo Ramirez in negotiations with the WBC champ, Noer Mikelian, and give Zurdo another fight in this division and another opponent in this division where he could build up and better prepare against Jayo Petaya, which would be the ultimate showdown. All roads leading in that way. Noer Mikkelyan, similar fighter to Arsen Gulamarian. I think Zurdo would be favored to win if he continues to apply this style of fight. Very dangerous for him because he's dealing with heavier punchers, heavier hitters, but he's able to mitigate the damage. He's able to power through the power of these cruiserweights by volume punching. Outworks them, outpunches them, outlands them, and he's a good puncher himself. We know that about Zurdo Ramirez, that he always possessed that knockout power. Well, it's not knockout power now, but it's very contending and it's paying off for him. So congrats to Zurdo Ramirez. He is now the sole standing unified cruiserweight champ. Who would have imagined this when he announced that he was moving up to cruiserweight? Remember that light heavyweight war or catchweight war that he had with Joe Smith? When he said he was going cruiserweight, nobody really gave him a chance. And look at him now, a unified champ. All in all, amazing card. The Latino night in Riyadh season, amazing card. Great fights through and through, great boxing. And for a pure boxing fan, it was awesome. Every single fight that was on there delivered. They were entertaining and high stakes through and through. Oscar Duarte continues to name himself as one of the top contenders at 140, and Barbosa ends up derailing a former unified champ, or at least handing him a defeat, remains undefeated, and should be moving on to a title shot. More than likely up next, if not within 2 fights. Oscar Collazo unifies and dethrones the longest reigning champion in history at minimum weight. And then look at what Zurdo Ramirez did in the main event of the card. All in all, before I go, the last thing that pops in my head here is the news. There was an interview that took place midway through this card with Vergil Ortiz and Oscar De La Hoya. And as they're interviewing them, it looks like February 22nd is when Vergil Ortiz will be returning to the ring. And they announced 3 names. They said that the works are between Crawford, Boots, and Sebastian Fundora. And Vergil Ortiz says he's not going to be able to spoil who they're in negotiations with. Rumors automatically have already been out within the past week of Crawford, Vergil Ortiz being up next. Many publications are running with that news. I'm going to give you something. I know Matchroom and De La Hoya called out after Boots, after Ennis's recent victory and against Chukazian, where he retains his title. De La Hoya immediately started calling and going back and forth with Eddie Hearn about Boots and Vergil Ortiz next year. So that's where the attention is going. I'm going to tell you that, in my opinion, Gabriela Fundora, who is promoted by Goldenboy, and you guys know that I interviewed her and I interviewed Sebastian Fundora as well, he was supposed to be fighting in January against Errol Spence. The WBO stepped in. They didn't want to sanction the fight with Spence and Fundora, so they ended up throwing in Crawford's name in there. The WBO standing behind Crawford and wanted Crawford and Fundora to happen at 154. Now, those talks haven't been out. Nothing is secure, and it looks like that date for Spence and Fundora has been scrapped. And being that I'm telling you that I interviewed Sebastian Fundora, all roads to me, now that Vergil mentioned this and they threw Sebastian Fundora's name in the mix, and he is the only unified champ or the sole standing unified champ at 154 right now, I believe that Sebastian Fundora and Vergil Ortiz may be the ones fighting February 22nd. I know the popular one would be Crawford and Vergil Ortiz, or even Crawford and Ennis, those 3 names that got mentioned. But Sebastian Fundora is the unified champ at 154, and he was roaming around at the Goldenboy event, obviously supporting his sister, who is promoted by Goldenboy. But there was a lot of conversations between Eric Gomez and Oscar himself happening with Sebastian Fundora and his family, and they have a very good relationship with the Goldenboy staff and the Goldenboy the Goldenboy crew. So I get this inkling, like the fact that he was there and that he's been involved in several of these Goldenboy, even if it's in the background, I believe there's negotiations going on there with Vergil Ortiz and Sebastian Fundora. And this obviously took place out in Vegas. where Goldenboy is established now. So I believe that it's going to be Virgil Ortiz challenging the unified champ, Sebastian Fundora, February 22nd. Now that they said that they're sticking with that date for Virgil Ortiz, February 22nd. Also, Sebastian Fundora said between the interview, go check out the interview. Go to YouTube, check out the interview I held with him, because he also made mention, if I'm going to be on or around January, maybe February, I'll be returning. And then I asked him, the initial plans were the undercard. Sebastian Fundora, Errol Spence, with David Benavidez and Morel fighting as the co-main event. And Fundora says, well, check out the interview. He says that fight deserves to be on his own. And as of this recording, David Benavidez and Morel will be fighting February 1st. They have their own card now. The Tank Lamont Roach card got scrapped, and it looks like that's going to be rescheduled, not happening in December. So I believe that Fundora will be sliding over to February 22nd and fighting Virgil Ortiz. Well, you heard it here first, and that's just my opinion. I'll leave you guys with that long episode. Amazing card overall. Latino night and Riyadh season. And I'll leave you guys with that, and I'll catch you all in the next episode. Take care of yourselves. Have a good night.